Okay, I feel like I'm gonna do quite a lot of explaining on this episode and, a lot of challenging of beliefs and opinions, but all in all, this episode is mostly going to be about misunderstandings. And I'll be breaking down some misunderstandings about women, about men, about relationships, and probably a little bit more than that. So I'm hoping that you do actually get to understand whatever the hell it is I'm trying to say. And as usual, if you don't agree with it, then you can always tell me on the socials. But before I can get into any of that, first of all, if you hear a bunch of ambient noise in the background or just noise in the background, apologies for that. There's some construction that's happening around my ends, and these people just do not know when to shut those machines off. But for the most part, I will try to kill most of it off in editing, so hopefully that should help. But with that said and done, I want to start things off not talking about any of the misunderstandings, but talking about a 26-year-old Russian woman who has, get this, 22 children. And she plans to continue going up until she reaches around 105. Like, first of all, I can understand that, someone not pulling out can have a good feeling for babes and all, but come on, bruh, 105 children? You can set up an entire league with that many people. What the fuck is her motto in this entire thing? Sperm lives matter?
The royal penis is clean, Your Highness.
Honestly, some people are claiming that this could be a fetish, and I'm actually inclined to agreeing with them, except that that's a little too easy of an answer to give for why this is happening. And I know a lot of people, they end up doing some weird shit. And then most times people just chalk it down to a fetish. But in this particular case, I don't see how this is something that you would consider to be arousing in a sense. But all in all, I'm just going to read the story for you, and then I'll let someone else read their version of the story for you. So the story says, and I quote, Russian mother Kristina Ozturk, residing in Georgia, has embraced 21 children through surrogacy, with 20 born in just over a year. She aspires to have up to 105 biological children with her husband Galip, who is a millionaire but was sentenced to 8 years in prison for illegal drug purchase and possession. An Instagram video showcased her children, with all but 2 born in 2020 and the eldest Victoria born in 2014 from her previous marriage, while the newest addition, Olivia, arrived in January of 2021. Christina is a mother to a multitude of children, each with unique names. In February, Christina authored a book about her parenting experiences, emphasizing the continuous quest for information to provide the best for her children. End quote. Now, I'm looking at this entire thing and I'm wondering what would make her want to have 105 children. Even just getting to the number 105. Crossing the number 100. Just saying that you want to have many kids and then actually working towards getting this many kids is a little bit wild for me. Now, another content creator on IG happened to also give his take on this entire thing, and I want to play that one before I can say anything. So, without further ado,
22 kids at the age of 26, and she won't stop until she has more than 100. Kristina Ozturk says she wants as many as 105 biological kids with her 58-year-old millionaire husband, who was recently sentenced to 8 years in prison. Kristina says raising all these children is challenging at times without her husband, but she does get help from her 16 live-in nannies, which she spends around $96,000 a year on. She also spends around $5,000 a week on essentials for the kids. The original plan was to have a baby every year. However, she realized that wasn't going to get her to her goal of over 100 kids, so she uses surrogate mothers, which each cost around $10,000 per pregnancy. The oldest child was birthed by Kristina in 2014 from a previous marriage, and the rest were genetically her and her husband's, but carried by surrogates. 20 of her children were all born in the same year.
Okay, just think about this for a quick second. Imagine the kind of black tax you'd get if you were the firstborn and this was an African home. You'd be paying school fees until you die, and then the person after you would also have to be paying school fees until they die, all the way till they get to the 100th person. At the end of it, you kind of have to sit and ask yourself why the hell someone would want these many kids. But all in all, the person that I feel the most sorry for is the husband, because now this guy's nut has to work overtime since the guy is in prison. And by the time the guy gets out, he might have to start again from scratch, because taking care of these many kids with all that much that is required to take care of them, and they're already just at 22, you kind of have to wonder if this guy is gonna be left with any wealth. But then again, he might have the same mindset as the older Africans who believe that children are a luxury and are a sign of wealth. And, maybe I should probably leave that story aside and start the podcast in a much better fashion by saying, welcome to the Breakdown Podcast, the podcast where I discuss love, sex, and relationship from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other things. The man on the mic is a man who believes in pulling out. Not unless if you're this woman's husband, of which leave everything in and let it not get to waste. Don't even let her give you head just in case she swallows a nut. No, she wants to have kids. Let every single nut be devoted to that cause. He's a man who used to believe that bukkake was a Japanese form of martial arts. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. This is the Friday episode, so I usually tend to get into the tweets and look at some of the things that you guys say and give one or two thoughts about it. And because of that, it usually means that you, the listener, can also contribute to the making of this episode through sending in the many different tweets that you see, be it on X, be it on Facebook or IG, and I'll show you how in a second, so you can contribute to the making of these episodes. And it's a pretty simple drill, almost sounds like a song, and it goes like this. You see that tweet, you like that tweet, you want us to discuss that tweet, you send that tweet. You send it to the DMs of @BagakaTheD, which happens to be my personal Twitter handle. On Facebook and on IG, if it happens to be a screenshot, a screen grab, if it ended up on a reel, then the place to send it to is at the Breaktime Podcast on Facebook, and on IG you can send it to the DMs of the Breaktime_podcast. The DMs are always open, and I will take it from there and handle it accordingly. Now, I have a couple of tweets that I need to get into, and because of time, because I ate so much time initially at the beginning, I do want to brush past and move to them quickly. But before I can do that, I want to play a clip for a little bit so that I can talk about something I've been meaning to talk about for quite a bit. So without further ado...
What's your body count?
Me or Fresh?
You. And then Fresh after you, but you first.
Oh, God.
I asked first, so you tell
Not sure, of course. 447.
Huh? 447. 440. Are you serious?
So I got this clip from the IG page of a man known as Myron Gaines, who most people who are usually online and talk about relationships would know him as one of the two people that makes up the main hosts of the Fresh and Fit podcast. Now, this is a discussion that I've been feeling that we need to have for a little bit. Not necessarily because we haven't had it. Hell, I've even done like a short clip on it on IG, which you can go and check out. It's pretty interesting. But for the most part, it's mostly the idea of having a high body count as guys. Like when this guy was saying that he has a body count of 447, first of all, I personally thought that was cap, just mostly because of the way the guy talks. There's a way that someone with a high body count will usually talk. And there's a very nonchalant and relaxed way they will discuss women and discuss about women that he doesn't particularly seem to have. But anyways, I'm not his dick. It's not like I keep count or know all the women that he slept with or any of the women that he slept with. But all in all, there's a lot of guys that take pride in having a massive body count like this, in trying to have a massive body count, of which there's something that I've been saying for a little bit of a while, just not on the podcast, but mostly, with a lot of my friends. And it's in regards to the whole high body counts thing, because I also started seeing a bit more research that shows that women actually do not like a man with an incredibly high body count. Now, the thing that I've been saying recently, which isn't even tied to women wanting a guy with a high or a low body count, is just the fact that as a guy, if your body count is on the 3-digit and above range, it's not about the sex for you. Like, it's gone beyond the whole idea of I want to have sex with a babe. So a lot of times it'll be some sort of compensation, it'll be some sort of ego boost, it'll be some sort of insecurity that you're trying to sort of get around by having sex with a lot of women. And at the same time, it could also be a sort of sex addiction. Now, granted, there are exceptions to this rule. So for example, if you're a famous person or a celebrity and you have a certain wow factor around you, then you could manage to exceed the 100 body count mark, but that usually doesn't affect a lot of guys, and that one's usually because there's a lot of women that I don't say are throwing themselves at dudes, but are very willing to sleep with those guys. So it just makes it a hell of a lot easier for them to rack up the numbers pretty quickly, because not only are the women interested in doing it with the guys, but they're willing to do it, and they're willing to do it without a lot of fuss. Now, with that said, the vast majority of us guys don't have that high of a body count. We're probably not even going to get anywhere near 100. But for a lot of the guys that get there, for a lot of the guys that exceed it, it's usually an indicator that there's something that is wrong, because it's not that you're just doing it just for the sex. Because at some point, and this is something that guys who have gotten quite a lot of pussy, especially over a shorter period of time, can probably admit to, which is it actually all starts to feel the same. Like the novelty of getting in this new babe and then managing to bang and shit actually sort of wears off. And when it gets to that point, you stop valuing pussy all that much. A lot of times guys will also talk about how they realize how vain and how vapid a lot of that shit is. And then they actually just sort of relax on it, because it's not like adding another babe to the roster will really help them all that much. But all in all, considering that I haven't reached that level, I could be wrong about it. So I do welcome the criticism to it. But all in all, I do believe as a guy, while having a high body count does kind of seem like a good idea for a lot of guys, and the prospect of you're this guy that can bag all of these babes sounds great, at the end of the day, there's a good chunk of it that you'll realize is just pointless, because you're not really going to go and brag to your friends that you've done it, not unless if you're the asshole that kisses and tells. And for the most part, you kind of realize that a lot of that sex will be very meaningless at some point. But then again, what do I know about having multiple bodies? I'm just a guy on a podcast, so I'm just gonna leave it at that and move it on to the tweet so that I can get into them. So on to our very first tweet of this episode, and it is actually sex related, just kind of keeping the vibe going a little bit, but it's from the women's side. So it was a guy who said, and I quote, "Girls from rich families tend to be very bad at sex because it's not their source of income," end quote. And the moment I saw this, I kind of cringed a little bit, because this talking point sounds like it carries a lot of merit. It's just that if you sort of test this belief system against a couple of other instances, it sort of starts to break down. Because it's like saying that if you are a chef, then someone who just really likes cooking at home probably won't be better than you when it comes to making food. Now, you can argue that out, but at the same time, if you actually look at this argument at its absolute core, you'll realize that this isn't comparing a chef with a food enthusiast. This is comparing your typical cook out here with a food enthusiast, or just someone that likes cooking at home, or someone that's open to cooking at home. And then that entire argument sort of breaks down, because it's not like the babes who will fuck around for a living are particularly well versed in sex. Like, it's not like they have this sort of immense sexual education that makes them particularly great in bed. Like, a good chunk of them are usually just good looking enough, or they make themselves look good enough that someone is willing to put money down to lay pipe on them. All right. So for the most part, it's almost like thinking that a porn star is great in bed because they've slept with, say, over 100 or probably even over 1,000 other performers in the same industry, of which it could be true, but for the most part, these guys aren't really taught how to have great sex. They're just taught how to have sex in a way that looks good on camera. So fine, yes, maybe a shorty here and there in the industry can know how to throw it back pretty well, and they look so good as they're doing it, but at the end of the day, these guys are performers. So even though you might think they're that great in bed, there's a lot of them that actually aren't all that great. Some of them are just good because they have a big dick, or because they look good on camera, and thus they'll end up selling a hell of a lot more. And they'll end up getting more gigs as a result. It's almost like thinking that me, who works in customer service, would be great with dealing with very problematic women because I know how to escalate and de-escalate a lot of people who have a shit ton of complaints. Of which the reality of it is I fucking hate people who complain. Like, not even from a professional sense. Yes, I may know how to de-escalate a complaint, but it's not like I enjoy or I like it or I know how to deal with a problematic girlfriend. Like, a problematic customer is one thing, but a problematic girlfriend is another. So it's not like I am going to translate whatever skills that my profession requires into my relationships and thus make it a much better thing. Like, at the end of the day, it doesn't always turn out that way. But all in all, maybe I might be wrong, because I guess I don't know, because I don't usually pay women to have sex with me. But I am going to leave it at that and move it on to our very next tweet. So it says, and I quote, "Men, what exactly are you bringing to the table?" End quote. All right, so this question is a callback to a time when there was the whole tables argument, which was somewhere around 2021, if I'm not wrong. Like, that was the time when people were busy having this whole discussion, and it was mostly the women who were being asked what exactly they bring to the table. And in my opinion, much as I feel like the question and the whole tables argument was very overused during that time, and even afterwards, I do think that it set a pretty nice precedence in a lot of people, more so women, understanding the value that they bring in a relationship and the fact that they need to bring value in a relationship. Because at around that time, I think there was this massive, sense of delusion that a lot of women had, where it was all about the man needs to do this and that for me, the man needs to do this for me, I want my dream boyfriend to get me this, to do this for me, to buy me this and that. And it was very, very toxic online, and it was warping the idea of what a good relationship should be to a lot of people, regardless of whether it's men or women, but more so the women. And the tables argument actually did come up, and it was particularly good. I dealt with it quite a bit, and it forced a lot of women to sort of ask themselves what value they bring into a relationship and where their value in a relationship actually lies. Because you're not really going to get a guy to commit to being with you, not unless if there's value. Because whenever a guy is getting into a relationship, there's a certain sense of responsibility that's attached to it. And if you are going to take up that responsibility, that burden, then it now becomes a question of who you're willing to take up that burden, that responsibility for. And as a result, for a lot of women, I guess they were probably forced to understand where exactly their place is and what exactly they bring into a relationship, at least from a value add perspective, in whichever way you'd like to look at it. Now, of course, there's some women that avoided the introspection that came with this question entirely and just focused on trying to get an answer for it. And that was when they started bringing up this whole answer of "I am the table," which I found to be very dumb and very cringy to an extent. But at least I managed to debunk that one during that point in time. And, during that time, what I said was, if you're the table, then maybe you should be comfortable with me having more than one table in the house. Maybe you should be okay being thrown out if I feel like you cannot handle the weight of everything that I am putting on you. Maybe you wouldn't mind a little bit of remodeling. Maybe you wouldn't mind it if I just decide to leave you aside and decide to not care for you. Essentially, what I was trying to say at the time was the whole idea of assuming that you're the table and we should leave the argument there is particularly dumb, because they're ignoring the more important part of the question, which was determining where their value lies. But all in all, so that it doesn't sound like I'm trying to run away from this question, what exactly do men bring to the table? For the most part, I'd like to think it's pretty self-explanatory. There's provision, protection, penetration, aka sex, preceding, aka leadership, our genetic material so that you can produce offspring. There's a balanced sense of thought and reason, which I believe that quite a number of men have. So if you're lucky enough to get one, that'll be great. And also you have someone that cares for you and supports you. I believe that all of these things are very easy to see, and they do for the most part tend to seem pretty tangible, which is why I guess there's not that many women that were asking men what exactly they bring to the table. But at least for the most part, because the requirements for guys have mostly been the same for quite a number of years, we know it by default, as opposed to a lot of women who have tried to shift one thing one way or another based on things like culture and the desire for individuality and wanting men to contribute a little bit more here and there. But then again, I could be wrong about all of this, but I'm going to leave it at that and move it on to our very final tweet of this episode, which says, and I quote, "Relationships are easy AF when you're not dating a lying whore." End quote. Now, let me see. Are they easy AF when you're not dating a lying whore? I can say yes and no at the same time. Yes, because you don't have to worry about them cheating on you and possibly lying to you, but it's mostly the cheating part, I guess. But at the same time, I'd say no, because there's a lot of other problems that affect relationships that can cause the end of relationships than just being a whore. Like, the very unfortunate reality of a lot of us people today in the dating market is a lot of us put too much emphasis on the possibility that your partner can cheat as, the main thing that can break a relationship. And we ignore that there's so many other issues that can cause the breaking of a relationship, the strains to a relationship beyond just infidelity. Now, don't get me wrong, infidelity is actually a serious issue in a relationship, which can cause the end of it, but it's not the only issue when it comes to relationships. There's other issues that can cause the end of a relationship, that can cause a lot of strain and a lot of pain in a relationship that a lot of people, I guess, don't talk about today. So things such as avoidant behavior, so your partner, instead of being conveniently unavailable, they're just completely unavailable and they never want to open up their feelings. They do not do that much in the relationship, so you feel like you're existing all alone. There's also things such as manipulative behavior, but I guess you can also chalk that up to being a lying hoe, minus the whole part. But there's other things that seem a lot more mundane, like financial management. People forget that financial management can end a lot of relationships. It's just that a lot of people don't talk about financial management like that. And, they almost take it to a point where they make it like an individual thing. But bad financial management, poor financial management, it's actually an issue that can cause the end of a lot of relationships, especially when you find that one partner is borrowing from the other and not paying back. One partner is being very reckless with money. One partner is not trying to advance themselves on a financial perspective or is not trying to invest the money, while one person is trying to save, the other one is busy spending a little too much. Like, those are things that can cause the end of a relationship. There's also things like, difference in terms of values and, sometimes even political beliefs. Those are things that can end relationships. A lot of people believe that, something like political beliefs probably shouldn't. And, I'm of the opinion that, if you have certain political beliefs, I don't think that they should necessarily end the relationship. But when it comes to things like values are very, very important. A lot of times when people have differing values, regardless of what stage and what kind of level they are, whether they're like foundational values and all, a lot of times when people have differing values, the relationship doesn't really last all that long. So all in all, there's a lot of things that can cause the end of a relationship. There's a lot of things that make a relationship really hard to be in. And much as infidelity and, being a lying hoe can definitely be somewhere at the top of the list, there's still a lot of other things that are there. So yes, maybe not being a lying hoe makes the relationship better for the both of you, but at the same time, there's a number of other issues that you need to look into when you're in a relationship so that you guys can actually make things as good for each other as possible. Of course, at the end of the day, the easiest relationships to be in are the one where both parties who are in that relationship care about each other and are willing to do whatever it takes to make the relationship work. Because the moment both of you are putting effort into that relationship, it becomes so easy that, especially for guys who usually talk about, I miss being single every so often. Like, a lot of times those guys are like, I would not ever want to be single because the kind of support I've gotten, the kind of treatment, the kind of love and affection, the kind of life that I have, I wouldn't want to trade it up for being single and possibly getting like a little bit of extra pussy here and there. Although, then again, I might be wrong about the entire thing, so I want your thoughts on it. On Twitter, or is it X, @BagakaTheD is the handle to hit me up on. On Facebook, it is @TheBreaktime Podcast. On IG, it is @TheBreaktime_podcast. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.
But what I believe is that if you put a pastor and a prostitute in one room, one is likely to convert the other.